Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Out of the Mud, a place we'd all like to be at the moment. I'm Lee. I'm from Island Biologicals on Oxley Island. I'm joined tonight, fortunately, by my mates Chris Eggert and Pat Allen, who offer some experience to the idea of flood recovery, having been through it themselves as floodplain farmers. Um, just before we roll, I just ask if everyone could keep themselves on mute, except for the gentleman that might want to chime in as we go. Just gets a bit distracting. Also, that this is going to be recorded with the aim of probably this will go on our YouTube channel. So if anyone wants to say anything incriminating, please put it in an email and send it later. So tonight we're just going to go through a bit of, well, some experiences from Chris and Pat that have got themselves back to good positions after some quite negative flooding. This year's still a work in progress. Pat is on the Clarence River and had his bigger flood in 2022. However, being a floodplain, I think he's had he can tell us how many smaller floods he's had since then. Each flood or significant wet period brings some challenges. It brings some opportunities as well. And we'll just run through a bit of what's been learnt. As for myself, I don't run a farm. I can't really help you out with any of that stuff. However, we run a medium scale worm farm, and my interest has always been in soil biology. So we're just going to have a bit of a run through of really what it takes to stabilize your soil and to get your soil working again after a significant wet period, potentially making the most of soil that you've gained from somewhere up the back of the valley. And at that point, we have to acknowledge that if we are on a floodplain, probably, no, not probably, the prosperity and the fertility of that floodplain owes itself to flooding in the past. So, whilst the impacts, and this one's been a cracker, are quite negative upon the farming and upon the people, the reality is for us, the flooding is the prosperity of that island or my island and of those floodplains. We need to examine our relationship with that, and we need to see some of what's arrived as part of the process. And look, for the people, we need to look after each other because there's been some very uh, catastrophically negative consequences. Hello, has everyone got that really righto? I don't know what just happened there. The technology, fantastic. We'll just hope it won't happen again. I'm still recording. We have a winner. Right, so I'm going to run you through a couple of things in relation to the way soils are held together and some of the things we're going to need to consider when we're coming back from a little bit of a incident like this. So generally speaking, I'm mostly going to deal with places that have gained soil or have had paddocks significantly wet for a long period. The whole thing about places that have lost soil further upstream and suffered some fairly horrendous riverbank remodeling. We are considering covering that off a bit later. My wife has a degree in geomorphology, which is kind of handy. Makes for some interesting dinner table chats, that's for sure. She is more the person to cover that stuff. Tonight, we're going to look at recovering soils for the idea of production in our lower catchments, I would say, is there are lessons to be learnt for the other soil issues, but mostly that's what we're going to go with tonight. So I'm going to share my screen and we'll just go through a couple of things I've put together and then we're going to hear from the fellas. Now, before we kick on, no one here is offering anybody any generic agronomical advice. Uh, we haven't been to your place. We don't know what's going on. I hope there's some insights that can help you on your path, but we're not here giving you a prescription for fixing up your place. Okay, so um, let's be quite clear about that. There's some things that have worked for people. There's some general principles that we can look at that I believe are very helpful in the way back from some of these things, but it is it is experiences. I'd also like to say I represent Island Biologicals. We make a liquid vermicast product. It is not a biocast advertorial. It will get mentioned in the context of seed inoculate, seed dressing. However, I'm not here to try and sell you biocast tonight. That's tomorrow. Right.
Is that the cat coming in the back there, Lee?
No, hang on. Oh, this is Salty Dog, who's just come to join the webinar. Thank you, Salty. Um, so as far as flood stuff goes, Salty is very, very hydrophobic. So I didn't go anywhere near it, making him much more sensible than me. Right. Uh, Now, hopefully we have a picture of Pat's quad bike, which is not really what I wanted. Right. So here, welcome out of the mud. I'll send links at the next week to Pat's YouTube channel and also to Chris Eggert's website. Sorry, I should say Anne's website because let's face it, Chris didn't do it. Um, there's some good YouTube stuff on there. There's some pretty upfront and honest um, appraisals of life on the land. So we'll also send you a couple of videos we've made specifically about this flood stuff. A couple are at Chris's, and there are a couple of comparisons in there, and a little bit of stuff that I've been playing in the mud and doing a few experiments as well. So this is a lot of the end of Oxley Island at the moment. The grass is starting to poke through some of the mud. There is still a lot of mud and there is still water laying in quite a lot of places. So it's not looking particularly fantastic, but at least the sun's out at the moment. There's quite a lot of places that also look like this that didn't suffer the full wrath of the river, if you like, but have been wet for so long. We were wet already, and then that quick 600 mil in 3 days didn't do anything to dry it out. Uh, it, we're dealing with some of the same issues when we deal with soil in that condition. Largely, the problem with both of those is going to be that the air's gone, the aggregation is gone, and in particular with the two with the flood, what are we calling it? Mud. Right. So you can see here, I've got a jar with plant associated soil in it and a jar straight from the mud plane. It's just got nothing to bind it. It has no aggregation. It has no glue. It has no Perkins paste in the mache. It is just dirt at that stage, or at the moment, mud. The problems going forward, if we don't do something about the mud and help uh, change its form to soil, is that it's got a good chance of setting like absolute concrete. Let's watch that again while I talk. Um, or if we do get another significant rain event, hopefully not quite so significant, as you can see, a bit of water on it and is highly dispersive. So that will disappear just as quickly as it arrived. So things we can do, really, all of our focus, in my opinion, needs to be about forming aggregation. So what are soil aggregates? What are these magical things? So Soil aggregation is formed in a relationship between plants and microbiology and the mineral soil and the organic component of that soil. So in this photo diagram, there are roots represented in the brown. There is spaces in between the particles of soil that allow air into that soil, that allow biology to be alive, that allow macro invertebrates and worms, which we can call a macro invertebrate, to be in there. They allow for greater plant root penetration. The aggregates themselves are stuck together with various glues and gums created by biology and plant exudates. So glomalin being one, which is produced by fungi and also by bacteria. But it is the soil being held both together and apart in that setting. So it it's the structure that stops it disappearing next time it rains. It is the structure that allows air in. It is the structure that stops it setting like absolute concrete with no space in between. Now, we also had, I guess, a similar situation in the years that say 2021, 22, when we had a wet period for such a significant time, even though, sorry, Pat, your flood doesn't count in this instance, but the the flood might not have been as dramatic. It was pretty dramatic. The wet period extended on for so long that the air spaces, in my opinion, have collapsed upon themselves and been driven out of the soil by just constant waterlogging. So the same thing needs to be thought about in recovering those waterlogged soils. And when it did forget to rain, they did set like absolute concrete. And interestingly, talking to people from this side of the hill and the other side of the hill. If anyone remembers in that time, I think Gunnedah got 3 or 4 fairly significant floods at that time. They were saying the same thing. Our soil has just set like absolute concrete. So I believe all the air's been chased out, so the aggregation has collapsed. So for us, if we're going to get something going back again, basically the plant is our friend in that instance. The plant is the thing that is going to allow for those other things to occur. The plant creates the environment for the fungi and for the bacteria to go and create the gums and glues to keep the spaces apart. So in these couple of photos here, Chris could have washed his hands. Then again, I could have too. We've got on the left-hand side, we have a seed that I planted about 2 weeks ago. In straight into that mud field that we saw back here, straight into that, just as a little experiment to see what would happen. Now, I was pretty happy. That plant there has probably 75 mil on top and around 50 mil on the bottom in root mass. Now, what is starting to happen in that soil, the exudates of that plant have attracted microorganisms and they're forming a biofilm or a rhizosheath around those plant roots, and we are starting the process of aggregation again. So that's might be 10 days to 2 weeks. I'll put the little YouTube video out and I'll put a planting date on it as well. So that seed has been dressed with the popular liquid vermicast that we mentioned before. As far as it goes, it's the fastest I've seen roots form is if they have been dressed with a liquid vermicast. You can plant it without it. You can do it with seaweed or fish or something else. I just haven't seen them form better. Right. So from that place on the left, we are able to start rebuilding what you can see there on the right. Now you can see that clod of soil that Chris has got there. You can see how many holes there are in it from worms. Now, the worms couldn't be there if there wasn't some kind of aggregation. They also can't be there without something to do or something to eat. Back to the role of the plant. So, yeah, the microbiology and the exudates mean that we can have the worm will proliferate biology, and on this thing will go. So, round and round the circle. So chiefly, we need roots in that soil, right? So we get something like that. We have a resilience now being started to be built into that soil. This is from the opposite end of the spectrum. This is 2018 in Armidale. You can see the colour in the background there. I guess water is still the problem with this particular photo as well. But now we have a whole group of microorganisms there protecting that plant, forming associations, gathering minerals, and so on. Also doing cool stuff like housing free living nitrogen fixing bacteria. So what if we take that one of the where's my pointer? One of these little roots here, and we look at the riser sheath on it. What it is a very, very micro aggregation. This is one blown up quite a lot. And you can see it's clinging to that soil. It's absolutely stuck in there. So they're tiny balls of soil formed against the root by the gums and so on that we talk about. But inside of the microaggregations is the home for the free living nitrogen fixers. In the same way that a legume root will nodulate and keep the bacteria out of the oxygen, this does the same thing inside soil, but it's then creating the structure. So you've got lots of things going on in here, right? You've got the structure created, you've got the all those organisms working for you, working on that deposit that you just got for free. Maybe didn't want so much of it in your shed. We've got nitrogen happening. We've got a cycle going all over again. Really, it's all started by plants. So uh, as much as this is bordering on generic, plants is going to be our way forward. And I suppose if we take this to we want to recover pasture, plants is definitely our way forward. So if we're going to plant one plant, why don't we plant a bunch of plants? So suddenly we've got different roots that can support different microorganisms in that setting. We've got different shapes. We've got roots that can get further in. We can got roots that'll spread on the top. We've got a way to peg down our soil and stop it going anywhere. We've got all of those associations that we've mentioned. Um, each plant there can support a different range of microbiology. Each range of microbiology can support different functions, different pest and disease suppression, different abilities to gather different minerals for plants. So that relationship can't be overstated as to how important it is. The plant and the mineral soil and the biology is essentially is one thing. So holobiont is indivisible. We can't go saying, well, we'll do this thing and we don't need to even consider that bit. It is so intertwined with each other that we can't talk about one without the rest of it. So I'd say to everybody, probably a strong focus at the moment will be putting ryegrass back in, as ryegrass is possibly what was there before it got a bit flooded on. I have reasonable word that ryegrass is a little tricky to get. So maybe now's the time to start considering some other things. Not saying don't put rye in. What else can you get that will fulfill some of the functions, will still be feed for your animals, and will give you the properties that we've just discussed, and get you back on track. Now might be a great time for that. This little diagram here is very good. It is a little bit Eurocentric. We don't get some of these things, but we do get some of them. But you see a general picture, different things doing different things. While we're talking about diversity, very, very likely that that soil that's just arrived will bring some diversity of its own, and they're probably things we're not so excited about seeing turn up in our paddock. So they are getting called weeds, but I don't think there's any need for name calling. Now, at this point, if you don't have any other plans to plant something else in there, don't kill the early colonizers, please. They are still performing the function of the plant that we've spoken of. Now, We're not saying you need to leave them there long term, but if the only thing that is growing on your recently gained soil or your trampled mud or whatever the scenario you have is a plant that is considered undesirable, it is still photosynthesizing, it is still putting exudates back in, and it is still holding your soil together. So before we reach for the popular herbicide, maybe we could say thank you. We could consider why it's there. We could also consider what's the function of that plant. Let's take thistles as an example. If you have thistles growing, thistles have a fantastic taproot on them. So what function could we have? What plant could we have to fulfill that function if we don't really like these thistles? Well, we could say, I don't even know if they've got it here. Yeah, chicory. Okay, chicory over here has a taproot or a decent set of roots on it. It has a big broad leaf. It's going to photosynthesize really nicely. It's from the Asteraceae family, which is the same as the thistle. So we start to maybe fulfill the function of our weeds with some more desirables. But if we're not doing anything, if we're currently waiting till spring or we just can't look at that mud at the moment, just leave them alone. Just leave the weeds alone. They are fulfilling a function. So if I only get one message across tonight, and there's a fair chance I will, is we need plants to help our recovery. I know we're in a cool time of year. If the plant has even begun its growing journey and stuck some roots in, like our little mate here, it's at least helping you out. So consider. I hope everyone can have a think about that one in their current setting. As far as re-establishing pastures, really, that's going to be over to going to throw that one over to Pat in a moment. Um, go the plant. Right, I believe that's my last slide. Pat, do you want to come off share for a minute, or you just want to roll straight into it?
Yeah, I'm ready, mate.
Righto, so I'm going to formally introduce you because that seems polite. Ladies and gentlemen, Patrick Allen. Pat and I have been associated for a good few years now. Pat has a couple of properties in the Clarence area, and one in particular is very much on the floodplain. Pat has also of Pat's Regen Grazing YouTube channel, which is offering a very, very honest, no nonsense perspective on things that happen on farm. I find it refreshing in a world of overblown and overshinied examples of things that sometimes things aren't awesome, but some things are damn awesome. So I'll throw it
Really,
over
I'm
to you,
I'm
Pat.
also getting about 30 views per video, so it's not really taking the world by storm either.
But just one at a time, Pat. You'll get there.
That's it.
Go.
Um, so yeah, thanks, Lee. I started off the floodplain with my first farm and decided I could probably take on a flood paddock because of the better alluvial soil and all the opportunities to grow beautiful plants that brings. And within probably 6 months of buying the place, this is what it looked like. Um, so my whole farm goes underwater, bar the flood mound, which you can see where that green tank is. And another thing on this photo, which is handy, I put the drone up. All that green mass that's floating down the bottom right hand corner is water hyacinth that's just come out of the canals that sort of exist around there, the flood drains that they put in years ago. And it just sort of floats around until eventually it falls down on stuff. And you guys will have some experience, whether it's of hyacinth or other, you know, weed burden coming onto your place. Um, as the water receded after this is the 2022 flood, a major flood of the Clarence. I was probably earlier in my journey, and where now I probably wouldn't do any sort of cover cropping without at least four plant families in it. I was really just looking to try and get some quick feed going. That was my priority at the time. I had probably too many cattle around me, and you sort of just make decisions off the cuff a little bit. or I did at that stage. I'm a bit more prepared now. Um, that water hyacinth actually turned into a bit of a bonus down the track where wherever that landed, I had this awesome organic matter and I grew some really nice forage turnip, especially it took off wherever that water hyacinth was. So yeah, that's just something I learned as I did it. Yeah. I don't know if you want to click to that next one there, Lee, and
That one. Let's keep moving.
the the sort of tactic I took as that water came off. Um, this paddock that we're looking at was drilled with seed. I was able to get the tractor on then, obviously, but some of the earlier stuff that I planted was just spinning seed off the back of a quad bike with a tow behind spinner. That sort of had wider turf tires and you could get on a little bit easier without damaging your ground. Um, I'm very much, and it's common sense, but what Lee just pointed out with those slides about the air space in your soil and the root space and all those things that happen after a flood, you want to be careful you don't damage your soil further by the actions that you take. I think that's a really important first step. Is Mother Nature's dealt you a set of cards. Don't go and make it worse by just racing around doing stuff without thinking. So things like your tractors and your cattle impact are the two things that I've found quickest to wreck a good paddock. And I've sort of come up with strategies now where you just don't get the tractor out of the shed, obviously, but also with your cattle, I've kind of come up with a few spaces where I can feed some cattle maybe and just have a bit of a sacrifice paddock rather than letting them just randomly roam or walk up and down laneways or just create more havoc. Because that's going to cost you in the long run and it's going to take a lot longer to heal up. In this photo, I've drilled some seed and you can see there, and then obviously it's grown pretty well. But there is existing grass still there. So none of this has been sprayed out. I probably mulched this by the look of that paddock. I'd say I've run over it with a mulcher prior. That's something that I probably wouldn't do now. I think the less traffic passes, the better. And my sort of cover cropping experience has come a little bit further now, where I realise I probably don't need to do that as much. But yeah, if you flick to that next slide, as the weeks roll on, you can come up with a pretty decent result and some quick feed. And so this was a goal of mine at the time. I was just planning to get quick feed and try and establish something after the flood and try and keep me going into winter. Now it's worth noting, particularly for me now and my planning for a flood, the timing of the flood becomes really important to my decision making now. So I was really lucky to get some help and join the DPI's Farm Business Resilience Program, which offered some business coaching after the last flood event in 2022. That's changed my perception about how I'm going to manage my farm business coming out of a flood. And I was really proud that I actually enacted some of those things this year. I didn't get the complete devastation that some of the fellas further down south and ladies further south got, and to watch that stuff on the news and really see the impact that that's having on those communities. We know it too well here on the Clarence, and those record floods are very hard to handle because people who previously had flood experience and kind of knew where the water got to and knew what the damage was going to be, all of a sudden they get caught out. And if you get caught out by 500 mils of water, it's a big difference. It's the difference between sometimes coming in your house or not coming in your house. So there's a lot of other things other than soil health, of course. But from a farming perspective, I think my tactic now is if I'm getting a flood and it's too close to winter, I'm really quick to offload some cattle and reduce my numbers so that I don't have to take such aggressive tactics to try and grow some feed just to get myself out of trouble, because one of those earlier slides that you saw of Lee's was actually at my hill paddock where they were pugging, up to their hocks in mud, and that was on top of a ridge. Um, those paddocks still, I could still pick out that same cell and show you the impact that that's had and the change that that's had in that cell. I've got a lot more weed burden and other things. Even what 3 years later.
At this point, can I just ask you, what was the timing of this particular flood?
It was similar. So it was March. So we had the cyclone, and that was our big rain event here on the Clarence this year.
Uh, so for your big flood though, your
Yep,
2022, so that's the same time that Lismore copped its flood.
yep, yep.
So you're still earlier in the year.
Yeah, correct.
Righto. That the reason
And
I
so
asked,
this,
there's some stuff from Chris that I'd like to touch on about later stuff too as well. So
yeah, yeah.
thank you.
I think timing becomes really important on the coast because our growing season typically is going to cut out somewhere around Anzac Day. We're going to start getting cooler weather, shorter days, and you've really only got that option. This flood happened in the early part of March. We got a double pump, so probably by mid-March, the water was receding and getting off most places, and by sort of late March, early April, I was able to start doing this sort of planting. This flood now, this year, the wet dragged on so long, and we had that second pulse of rain, and then you guys had what I would have considered the third pulse. We were very lucky to miss it here at Grafton. But when Taree got the flood, it's so much later in the season that you're going to have, you know, a different set of circumstances to maybe what you're looking at here in this photo.
I agree with that, Pat. I'd like to touch on the timing thing a little bit more with Chris when we get to it. So if I do forget, someone please explain that I have forgotten, and we'll keep going.
Yeah. So that's sort of like, I guess my um, hierarchy of decision making now on the farm is soil health first and foremost, because that's, without that you haven't got a farm. So trying to limit the damage, do all those things I was talking about. Um, your livestock, of course, okay. You've either got to make the decision to sell a few or commit to feeding. Um, my experience out of this flood was probably choose one or the other. Don't go and start feeding and then give up on it and sell 2 months later when everyone's selling. You either sell early or you commit to feeding through if you've got the food. But money and energy comes into that too, right? So I've got a full-time job, and for me, going and feeding 3, 4 round bales a day to the cows, that takes time. And if you're using your tractor to do that, you're damaging your laneway, and then there's all these other things that come into it. So for me, I choose generally to sell, and I've sold 2/3 of my cattle just last Friday. I sold a truckload straight after the cyclone was predicted, so I actually sold it before it even started raining. Um, that might seem too reactive, but for someone like myself who's running a commercial beef herd, that flexibility that I've got, I kind of enjoy that. I've got I can run 60 cows pretty comfortably and trade up to 120, 150 extra head. And if I need to, I can sell that 150 head and really shrink down my forage requirements, especially coming into winter.
But
And that might be something that other people think about doing with their own herds going forward.
Pat, can you just tell us now that you've lessened your numbers, what sort of options does that give you for recovery at this point? And recovery of your animals later down the track.
Um, I've been lucky this flood. I'm not going to deny it, but I was ready. So like luck and preparedness are sort of interchangeable sometimes. Um, today I've been out planting, again on a paddock that I used as a sacrifice paddock. So I picked out a ridge paddock that had a bit firmer soil. had decent pasture base, etc., and locked the cows in it for longer than I normally would, and fed them some silage early in the season, earlier than I would have normally as well, to try and limit the area that was going to get damaged by the cattle impact. And so now I'm planting over that to try and reinstate the soil that you showed in those jar tests. Some of my soil in the corner of that paddock where the cattle were just standing and pugging it up would look exactly like what you had in that jar test. So by restricting that to just, let's say, I don't know, 5% of your farm or 10% of your farm, it's an easier cleanup job later on in terms of trying to get that structure back. um, what else? Like, it takes a weight off your shoulders. Honestly, the cattle I sent to Tamworth on Friday, they probably made $50 a head less than what ideally would have liked. But at the end of that, that's only half a silage bale each, right? And um, in the scheme of things, a 5% or 10% deduction on what you feel like your livestock's really worth, you'll spend that very quickly if you're trying to feed animals, especially if they're only from a commercial herd, not stud animals or milkers. So that's something that I look at as well. And the thing that does then is I came home on the Saturday, and you kind of look around and you're like, oh, that paddock's free now, and I don't have to worry about trying to move all these cattle into the next part of the farm and trying to keep them moving and keep them on good grass and stop them from standing in the mud. And it's very freeing feeling if you do take that option, I think, and it gives you more, or gives me more optimism about the future, where I think, okay, cool, now I can plant some feed, I can be ready, and yep, I sold these cattle now, but I'm going to be the first to bounce back, and I'll be ready with some feed, and I'll be able to buy them back before other people can make that trade as well.
I think that's a pretty interesting thought on that too, Pat. That that now opens you up to being able to buy cattle pretty well with quite well recovered ground. So it's not an option for everyone, but I hope that that's something people can think about for their own scenarios. I don't I don't see the feed thing being a good thing this year, given what's happening in South Australia and Victoria, given how many round bales there are on Old Bar Beach at the moment. It's hard to see feed uh, the prices of it being a good thing for this year. So I know there's circumstances and everyone's is different, but I think that's an interesting thing to think about.
I can't justify it, no matter which way I've done the numbers. Feeding cattle, feeding commercial cattle anyway, doesn't pencil out. I think I understand why people do it, but I think when it gets to a natural disaster of this magnitude, especially the fellas that have had it down south, um, desperate times call for desperate measures sometimes, and sometimes it's good to do the opposite of what everyone else is doing in your district.
Pat, what was the program that you got your business coaching from? What was that?
It's a DPI thing, so New South Wales DPI, Department of Primary Industries, and it was called the Farm Business Resilience Program.
Righto, and I got no idea what will get rolled out this time, but that sounded pretty useful, mate.
It was really good. I had a coach named Shane. She was from out at Moree, just a business coach that I guess they tender for these programs, and they get their funding is part covered by the government and part covered by the participant. So I paid 50%. I think it was something like $1,400 for a 13-week program, and she and I would just do a couple hours Zoom call every Wednesday morning. We ran through things like cash flow and farm costs and business planning and all business stuff that wasn't necessarily related to farming, as a specific industry, but overall business management and risk management.
Yeah.
And out of that, honestly, I've got a roadmap now where really, if I get the flood from March onwards, I've got to be on high alert that I probably need to sell some cattle, and sometimes being first out the gate is a good idea. Um, doesn't always happen like that, and I'm not here to give financial or investment advice, but it's just worth thinking about rather than just thinking, okay, I've got 20 hay bales in the shed, I'll feed those out and then I'll make my decision. You've got to realize everyone's doing that, and we're in a commodity market. So sometimes you're better off taking the pain early and getting out.
Yeah, I think that's a good thing to think about. Now, moving on with the practicalities of what happened, and these are probably now out of order.
Mhm.
Somewhere here, if we are going to recover this with plants, we're going to have to get them in the ground at some point. Um, could you? I wanted to go to that one before we go to the big gun. Can you just talk us through that for a sec, Pat?
This is my neighbour's setup, so I borrowed his quad bike and his spinner, and off I went. Basically, it's a very much more mobile and light on the paddock setup. That spinner's got quite wide turf tyres, like they'd be, a foot wide that you'd find on like a golf course machine or something like that, and that just helps spread the weight. You can see the grass that's there in the background, like that's just what survived the inundation. And in the background further on, obviously, is my swamp country, which is lower down. It's still got the water on it in that photo. But I just got around and started spinning that out as soon as I could while the ground was still wet. And I think that's important for the germination, especially a quick germination with this method. Any extra rain that you get from that day on too only helps wash it in and get it going. Um, in that paddock, I actually mulched over that afterwards. Just the way it worked out, I was able to get on there and mulch a bit of that. So that does help with it with the seed to soil contact as well. But I think with my experience now, I probably wouldn't worry about it. I think you could probably use a drone seeder or a quad bike spinner like this and get a reasonable strike if you put, a bit heavier seeding rate out and just put your ryegrass out on top.
Absolutely. But how much earlier do you think you got on that paddock using that as opposed to using that?
Oh, weeks, like
Yeah.
yeah, definitely weeks.
And,
This,
and in a way, Pat, that puts you on the same starting block as the weeds that are trying to germinate themselves in there rather than coming in later.
mm,
You're there in the same conditions, ready to rock at the same time.
yeah. So because I had to fish these photos out for you today,
Yeah.
that cedar, I'd actually been waiting for it for over a year for it to turn up, and it got delivered to Lismore like a week before the flood. And I rang the dealer up and I said, "Mate, that cedar better not be underwater." So this turned up at the start of May in that 2022, and you can see in the background of that pic actually now that I'm looking at it, that's that same swamp country that in the earlier
Yeah.
pic was still completely covered with water.
In that
So
one, right.
yeah, so see that big
Yeah.
puddle there?
Yeah. It's
That's
now a little
basically,
puddle.
it's a different angle on the thing,
Yeah.
right? Now, if we're talking the start of May, we've only just finished our growing season. You can see how the cooch, all that water cooch and the swamp cooch in the background's come back green.
Mm.
That was
Yeah.
because the flood was early enough for that to happen.
Still got a bit of warmth in it. Yeah.
This year it hasn't. My flood country's just coming out now, my swamp country rather, and it's still browned off. We've just had our first couple of frosts. It's a completely different scenario where even now I'm considering getting a drone out and maybe doing a bit of ryegrass seeding this year, even though it's getting quite late, um, just to get the living root in the soil because there's nothing out there at the moment.
We're
Um,
going to touch on the late bit here in a sec.
mm,
It makes an interesting point. Uh, late, how late's too late, or is it too early? There's a different question.
yep.
Um, so, Pat, is there any other lessons from that round that you want to take forward, or that it would be worth people considering?
Um, I think to me, doing stuff like this was you sort of you get in a bit of a method after a flood where you've got all these jobs that you've got to do. You know, you want to fix your infrastructure and you want to clean those fences off and get the farm back in order and that. And they are important steps at some point, but planting to me is like a really joyous experience. I love doing it. I love to put new life out there and take opportunities that present. And so this, even though it's work, it's not the same work as some of the other stuff that happens after a flood. And I think probably my biggest learning after this 2022 flood was about, I don't know, maybe 3 months, 4 months, maybe even 6 months after the flood. You kind of just you're rooted, you just sit back and you think, holy hell, like that was a thing. Like I did a lot of work there. I um did a lot of stuff, and you're kind of happy just to go and have a holiday and not think about doing jobs on the farm for 5 minutes. So for anyone who's going right in the thick of that right now, I think um take it easy on yourself, pick the jobs that make you happy and that are going to be productive decisions, and then leave some of the other stuff. And you can always come back and knock some stuff off the fence or tidy up something else later on, as time permits or when your energy levels are there, because I think that's an underrated part of resilience on your farm is staying resilient yourself.
Mm. I think that's a very important message to close on there, Pat, that, if you collapse as well, it's not going to go well. So I know whilst there's a heap to do, just be nice to yourself. Even if it's an afternoon, one afternoon when the sun's out, just sit outside and have a beer. You can call me, I'll come and join you. It's all right. Um,
Yeah.
so, Pat, we'll keep moving into Chris. There's a couple of questions coming in the chat, and we'll jump off the share screen at the end and we'll go through those. Pat, I think there's some really valuable learnings in that experience, and I thank you for sharing those tonight. We're going to go into a bit of Chris's stuff. I've only got two photos of Chris's here. I've got a number of questions for Chris, and there will be three or four of the videos that he and I have done on our stuff that we'll send to you. They're very, very interesting. But this one in particular, this paddock's a paddock I really wanted to talk about. And that's good because now we're not doing anything. We're not moving. And all right, we don't have the technology. Yes, we do have the technology. Hooray. Okay, Chris, this is your very bottom paddock. Um, this is not this week. So this is the paddock right down at the river. The reason I've put this photo in here from last year, and I'm going to say this was the 9th of September because apparently it was. Okay, this is it last week when I came to visit you. Now, obviously, what was there on the 9th of September last year, what wasn't what went
This is Pasture.
under, but it's still worth considering. Just keep that in your mind. And when you see the video, you'll see just what an epic amount of vegetation that is. All right, so Chris, this is it last week. Can you just tell us a little bit about that paddock?
Yeah, well, that paddock did go under. That was a river, 3 weeks ago. See how the grass has been pushed down and that, but that was, I think, 2.5 weeks after the flood. But we had a couple of, we had a decent summer crop in that paddock, and then I spun that ryegrass and clovers and chicory and whatnot on there. But I learned from the 2021 flood, was in the end of February, and I think I planted that paddock early and I mulched it. really low and I planted it, that like and it tore the ground up in that particular area. So yeah, we've always tried to keep like lots of plants on it, and well, we'll keep a massive plant on it, and yeah, it was amazing how it stood up after a few weeks. Yeah.
So if we turn the camera around the other way, there's a little bit of a slope, and then there's the river. So this is right in it. So because I did such a bad job at introducing Chris, for those that don't know who he is, he's from Ox Hill Organics, which is at Warhope. So this is on the Hastings River. So straight behind us, essentially, and down a little bit is the river. So this is right in it.
Yeah, it was punching through there pretty hard, but not as hard as in 2021, which was our biggest sort of flood. So yeah, well, I had a gut feeling that we're going to get a flood. Um, Similar circumstances from 2021 with what I've seen and what was going on with the weather and that sort of thing. So like we're really conscious of keeping a lot of ground cover on the paddocks. And that started from like basically the spring of last year. Like if we cut silage, make sure we cut high, cut the grass high rather just get plenty of ground cover all the time. Yeah.
So this paddock, you can see here, this has had big multis on it. You had a summer multi in there before this as well, or after
Yeah.
this one.
After that,
Yeah.
well, um, and like nothing there's been built or anything. Like it's still got like kikuyu and paspalum and Rhodes grass and all that sort of stuff in it. All these sort of grasses have managed to like evolve with those grasses. It get your timing right, I suppose. Um, yeah, that's the thing about that sort of picture of the dung peas and whatnot in there. Like they just chook dung peas. It's not expensive and that sort of thing. There's probably a bit of wheat and barley and that in there as well. Like you were talking before about the ryegrass and other alternatives like you can use like just wheat and barley and um, put the vermicast on them and get some life in the soil, get something growing, I guess. Yeah. So
That's a pretty good thing for people to consider at the moment, Chris. Some lovely multi-species mixes will pretty well cost you a kidney, but you can go and put something together with feed grade oats, barley, sunflowers, not now, but later, birdseed.
yeah.
You can lessen the impact. And I guess if you look at it that way as well, you can plant a bit heavier if you're not drilling and you're spinning it on and your germination rate's not going to be as high. You can plant a little heavier without really impacting the cost too hard. But you plant a lot heavier than a lot of people, Chris. Can you just tell us why that is?
Well, I see seed as a fertilizer. So seed doesn't germinate, then well, it hasn't gone anywhere. It's still there and still full of like it's got an energy component to it. It's also got some protein in it, which is derived from nitrogen. And every seed you plant, it's got biology in it, biology in the middle of it. So it's adding something to the diversity of your system. Um, a lot cheaper than like I haven't used chemical fertilizers for a long time, but it's still a lot cheaper. And it's
Yeah.
not doing any damage to your system. So, I mean, even if the birds come down and eat half of it or whatever, like they're still I've seen like on our floodplains now, like where there's mud and that, like if they're coming and like scratching for it and they're moving around on top of the soil and that, they're creating some disturbance and some aeration. Like I know it's only a little thing, but yeah, there's still something there, So
It's all joined together.
just join together and just making like little things like matter. Yeah.
Yeah. But Chris, when in the video that will be uploaded, that you spoke about how much your resilience is built on the condition of your paddock that as it went into the flood, and that influences heavily how you're likely to come out of a flood.
Yeah, well, I mean, that the paddock you saw before, where the floodwater had gone over it, like I could have, it would have been lovely to have grazed that. But in the back of my mind was like, with so much wet weather we've had already, and I know that paddock is flood prone, but in lieu of like making some more money off that paddock of grazing it and getting some money in the bank for the milk, like graze other paddocks and just let that sit and look after that soil for later. Because we don't know what's around the corner. Like at least we've got grass on it. It might rain for another 2 months, or we might get another flood in 2 weeks. I don't know. So yeah, like Pat said before, I think the key is like, especially now, it's like keeping your cows off your paddocks if you can, and maybe sacrificing them. And a plan for those paddocks, obviously, like if you sacrifice them and they get mudded up or scarred, or there's no grass on them because you're feeding silage or hay in them. But there's an opportunity there for later to plant some sort of a multi in there or whatever when you can get your cattle back on your main paddocks. And, yeah, there's an opportunity there because there's a lot of fertility there.
Look, essentially that was laid down over millennia by all those floods, Chris. So it's just, and in the video you'll see we've pulled the grass back and had a bit of a dig. There's a whole lot more soils just added to that.
Yeah, that's right.
It's
I mean, in
going.
the foreground, you can see those camphor trees and tobaccos and that. It doesn't look real pretty. But when I was a kid, there was nothing there. Like, I was all there because no one could stand inside of them. But, that's those trees there have slowed that flood water before they get to the next. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, slowed it down, and so when it's going to the next paddock, it's dumped soil out. And, 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 and even in that paddock there, we've gained fertility. Like, I can spread compost for years and years and not get gained underneath those plants. That silt and even the organic matter that when it slowed down and dropped out the grass, when you look down in there and like little sticks and leaves and stuff like that. Like, there's a lot of work to get those sort of things on your paddock. But if you have that vegetation on top of your paddocks before your floods, I think it makes a big difference. Yeah.
Chris, I don't have any photos of it, but I do have, it'll come out in the videos. Last year, apparently on the 9th of September, the same day that photo was taken, you showed me a paddock that's straight through the trees from here that had been grazed whilst it was very wet.
Yeah.
And I know the dates will be in the video, but you didn't plant it with rye and winter stuff until July. And you'll see in the video, it's an enviable ryegrass paddock by September. So again, I put the question about, okay, it's cold. We haven't had the shortest day of the year till a couple of days from now. Planting in July would seem to be really quite late, too late, wrong.
Yeah.
However, it has made for a cracking paddock, and when everyone sees it in the video, I think you'll agree. So, can you just talk us through what happened to that paddock to need for that to happen, and how you thought the recovery went after.
Well, I think it's what happened before because it was such a like we had a multi-species summer crop in it. There was so much organic matter in the paddock, and when the cows went in it, it's not like we plugged in trash, but it's like buffered by all the organic matter. So I was able to spin the seed straight on and run the cows over the top of it, and it worked out all right. We had a bit of rain after it, and that's been a bit of a difference this time. Is like there's been no rain, so I think what are we going into the 4th week, bud? And like really we've had no rain. But yeah, like I'm pretty cautious of planning at the moment. We're, like everyone, we're a bit broke. There's been a bit upheaval. Like I just don't want to react too quick. Um, really lucky that I suppose we're conservative over the summer. I had an inkling of flood all the time. So we made lots of silage. Didn't chase a lot of milk, as far as litres. Like we held back a bit, you know. Yeah, we're conservative. Like it looked good, and we had good amount of feed and that sort of thing. But we put some feed away. I don't know if I'm answering the question properly here, but or tied in.
That's
I
right.
just think like at the moment, like it's just like getting a little bit of stuff in the ground, and if you've got stuff in the ground, like Pat said, like before, like if weeds grow, like there's a benefit there. Like you just get biology in the soil, and you're getting some sugars like from the what's called the photosynthesis and all that sort of stuff. So you're getting a bit of life in the soil, and that'll tie us over for later in the spring and the summer. Um, so I'm more like looking at what's going to happen in September and October and November. So thinking like I looked at the paddocks on the weekend. I went for a drive. Still too wet to drill. Like with his seeder, like to put it straight in the ground, but it's like a bit like underneath, but it's like dry on top, and there's still a little bit of like kaikui still there and other types of grasses. And I'm thinking, man, I don't want to mulch those because I can get some grass off them. You know what I mean? And I can leave the silage in the bags for a little bit longer for a bit later on. So like today, I've put like all my dry cows and heifers and stuff like down on the flats where I'd normally I'm talking about river flats where I normally put the dairy cows and trying to graze them out. So maybe I can get the drill into the soil so I can get the seed into some moisture, if you know what I mean, like because there's none on top now. So bit of a tricky situation, like compared to like when we had the big flood in 2021 in February. Basically, that flood prepared the farm for winter feeding, for winter pastures. But, you know, like it cleaned everything up as if like you ploughed the paddocks. So in that instance, like I planted things like loose, which I used to plant, but I don't plant anymore because like obviously like moose and that like need a little bit of tillage and that sort of thing. So paddocks now that are pretty like muddy and not so good, and I'm looking like lucerne and things like that to planting them because like they're tilled already, yeah. Like they've got like not much competition on top. And those plants, if they can just hang on through winter, like they might transfer us in summer.
I think that's a bit of a message there too, Chris, that even if it's only stuck its head up and it sits there till August, till it decides to do anything, at that point it's stuck its head up and it's got roots in the ground ready for when it can grow. And
Yeah,
the little video down in the mud that I took today, it's actually grown. Like some stuff hasn't germinated well, but it surprised me the depth of the roots of these things already. Now, to my mind, that's so much further ahead when things do change, even if it's 75 mil tall now. If it gets to 100 mil before August, it's got 100 mil of roots as well. It's going to be that far in front of if you were trying to plant at that point. So I think it's still worth doing. Um,
Yeah,
Thoughts?
but I mean, it can prepare the ground for like maybe a summer crop, and like I don't want to bang on too much about summer crops, like in multi-species and that, but they're so good because that's when you've got the heat, you've got the day length, and generally got the rainfall. But now, like it's cold, like you're not going to grow much anyway. Like so for me, it's about preparing for what I can do to get more silage in the bank for times like now. I'm really lucky. We've got plenty of silage. Like, well, it's not. I suppose it's luck. But we planned for that. You know what I mean? Or we plan to have silage for shit times like now.
Chris,
Um,
I know if you look at all the um, seed company stuff and talk to agronomists and whatever, they tell you to plant your winter stuff earlier in the season because the production curve goes like this, and you only get so many kilos per hectare dry matter, blah 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 production if you plant it a bit later. But because we get forced into this situation now, and it's not going to be for everyone, but I guess my kind of take on it is you're better off planting late than not at all. And if you've got the stock numbers down, or if you can trade cattle like I can and manage your stocking a little bit on and off the property, that might allow you to have some really great feed in August, a month or 6 weeks or 2 months before other people do. And I think that's that's part of my strategy anyway. Have you tried to do much of that at all?
well, it's hard because like with the dairy cows, it's like yeah, it's hard to trade them. I've got rid of. Well, I'm trying to get rid of a lot of cows, but it's hard to get into the abattoirs and at the moment. Um, yeah, I do. Just, I think like it, if you can serve feed in the summer, like in good seasons, it's really for us with the organics, it's really important. I just can't ring up and get a load of hay or whatever, like organic hay. Um, but yeah, like it's definitely like some like advantages planting. You can plant whatever month you want, like
Yep.
but for me, whatever I do now is going to be preparing for like doing good stuff in the summer. I think so. Trying to get the ground in some condition.
Yeah, I think that's a bit of a thing to consider as well, Chris, is everybody. There isn't an instant recovery from any of this, but you can start setting yourself up for better recovery. And after 2021, I think a lot of stuff was only really getting back to good. So the more you can set yourself up, and during those good times, the better you can keep yourself, the better, the better is such a wrong word for that. The least worse, less worse you'll be at this particular
Yeah,
point.
that's like you can't prepare. Like it's pretty hard to prepare for stuff like happened down at Taree and at least more 2022 and that sort of thing.
Yeah, yeah.
You accept that this shit happened, and it's going to keep happening. Um, like, yeah, I don't know. I certainly don't have answers, that's for sure. Like, only, yeah, I mean, we're not obviously like going that great ourselves at the moment. We're struggling, like when I'm struggling and, we're battling through it. But for me, it's like Pat was saying, it's a biology in the soil and the plants in the soil is going to be key, moving forward and trying to
Yeah,
keep cattle off those paddocks, away from them weeds and all that, and like letting stuff grow so as much as we can. So instead of like, um, putting the cows in the paddocks and letting them like eat what's there because we've got a little bit of feed there and hugging it up. I'm trying to feed what reserves I've got now, like silage and hay now. View of looking after those paddocks rather than like trashing those paddocks and then feeding it after they're trashed and nothing left. It's like cold, wet weather, do a lot of damage to your paddocks. Like if you put so like Pat's obviously got rid of his, that'll be a sigh of relief. I've got like good stores of silage and that sort of thing. So I'm feeding the cattle them at the moment and trying to keep the cows off the wet pad.
Look, I think that's a pretty important thing that we have to look after that ground. I know it's pretty tough at the minute, but I'm probably going to look at winding this up here at the moment. Thank you, everybody. I see there's a bunch of questions, and I see Pat's answered most of them. Thank you, Pat. I'll send you your check in the mail. Was there any questions that anyone wanted to ask directly before we head off? Well, that was easy. Got away with that. Tim, to the things that are more flood tolerant, I know it's winter, but the bloody kikuyu is there's places on Oxley that the mud is a foot deep and the kikuyu's got its head sticking through it already. So I don't love the stuff, but I absolutely acknowledge its resilience to nearly anything. Damn stuff. Uh, um, okay, I can't see anyone waving to me. I can't see any more questions coming in there. All right. I will wind it up. We have gone over time. Doesn't there you go. Dale, I didn't answer your question. Turn your mic on out. Where are you? Dale, come on and ask your question.
G'day, Lee. How you going?
G'day, mate. How are you?
Good. Long time listener, first time caller, mate.
Well, thanks for calling in today, Dale.
Our question is that we had a reasonably large stand of reasonably unimpressive grasses before the flood,
Fantastic.
and now we've got a fabulous mat with a layer of mud icing on top that's now become a dusted icing layer, and we're low on technology. In terms of machinery on our farm doesn't exist at this stage. It's
Yes.
two people, 4 feet, and 10 cows. Is there anything we can do?
Have you considered a career in teaching? Well, okay, so I did read your question via email today. The potential of drone seeding is pretty good. I've no idea of a costing. If anyone has any idea of a per hectare rate. Now, the other thing, and I had it up before I managed to turn it off for myself, is I saw a very genius fellow got his leaf blower and
Oh,
drilled a
yeah.
big hole in it, right? Okay, and stuck a funnel on it and was blowing seeds all over the place. Now, okay, if you want to do 100 acres, it's going to take you a little while. However, if $250 an hour for drone. Thank you, Peter Dawson. Plus seeds, I assume. Um, so it depends how the short answer is it depends. Your cattle are going to help you putting seeds uh, back into the ground by standing on things. However, I believe you've sent yours on a holiday. So when
They're
they
at
get
fat
back,
camp as we speak, Lee.
yes, they're sorry,
They're at fat camp as we speak.
they're in Fiji, are they? Fantastic. Hope they're having a good time. Um, uh, the chucking seed out ahead of cattle. Now I know your pasture's looking a bit ordinary. Some of that, if it's not green and it's not photosynthesizing, it would be better to make it meet the ground in some way. Now, whether you call on your favourite up the road neighbour to borrow a slasher or mulcher, um, having the organic material from that being made to meet the ground will give it an opportunity to break down. If it's not doing anything and it's sticking in the air, it's not going to break down there either, and it's not going to photosynthesize. So it's really, really not serving a lot of purpose. It probably has caught you a fair bit of silt. Um, so
I reckon another thing, when it dries out enough that you can get your car on there or
yep,
access to a quad bike or something,
yeah,
just tie a couple of old gates together and drag them around behind.
yeah,
Um, that's better than nothing, right? You're going to
yeah,
knock down a bit of that silt, lay down some of the grass, and just give it a chance to knock down to that bottom layer. Ideally, you want probably some rain, to wash it all in. But
yeah.
this is the great conundrum of a flood on the north coast. We get absolutely smashed with friggin' 10 inches at once, and you just won't catch a break a month afterwards. So you're in the hands of the gods a little bit with that stuff, of
Yeah,
course.
but look, Dale, if you were to put harder seed out, like your clovers and your legumes and small grass seeds and so on, they will still sit there till their time has come. Whichever way that happens, whether it's when your cows come back from holidays or whatever, your bigger seeds are more likely to get eaten by something if they've got to sit there for that long. But um, yeah, so yeah, the gates is not a bad thing. A sheet of Rio mesh is good with a couple of tires tied to it. But yeah, really, it won't break down if it's not if it's sticking in the air. Now, Peter Dawson's just stuck in here that $250 an hour for a drone, and they did 16 hectares in 2 hours. So that's pretty good. That's
31.25 per hectare.
that's that's great. That's really good. So there's a few guys around in the Manning. I know I believe he's called Ag Drone Solutions, which is Josh. Um, there's a guy out Gloucester. I don't know him. There'll be yeah, a bit of Google will probably find you a drone guy. I did see the helicopter over Oxley Island the other day. I don't think that's $250 an hour. I think that's a little bit dearer, but it will cover some more ground. Um, yeah. So Dale, I hope that's just as unhelpful as it sounds, and thanks for calling in today.
Keep up the good work, Lee.
Well,
Thank
mate,
you.
and look, let's look at another opportunity, a fitness opportunity with you running around towing the gate.
Yeah, well, I don't have actually any good neighbors near me, so it looks like that's probably my best option at this stage.
Fantastic. Well, look, you're going to be very buff afterwards, so
Too late. Thank you.
thanks. All right, I'm going to stop the recording. If there's no further questions, I'd like to thank everyone for coming this evening. For all the people that aren't here that catch us on the action replay, if you've got questions, send me a quick email. The recording will come out tomorrow. The additional material will come out later this week. There's a bit of a time thing on that. My wife has to put it together and she appears to be busy. So I'm going to switch us off. Thanks again, everyone.
Thanks, Lee. Thanks for hosting, mate.